Before we come to the technology part, Iain, I want to come to you. You mentioned fans, and you mentioned the community angle. But I can imagine 2020 was a big hit for that community. How, like, what is the reality like for your club? How were you able to compensate for the losses that you guys incurred?
Yeah, it's a very good question. What a year it has been for us all, for the world, and for our sector, obviously football. And I think, like everybody else, you have certain things etched in your mind, and I have the date of the 13th of March etched into my mind. That's when we got notification from our FA, the Scottish FA, that football was suspended, and that was it. Everything stopped. It stopped that day. So we had a game the next day that was just off. It was just cancelled. Everything was in place and arranged for it. But all the community programs that we run, all the commercial revenue streams that we have, everything just stopped as quick as that overnight. But all our costs were still there, of course, because you still have all your ongoing fixed costs, you still have all your player wage bills, everything was still continuing. So it was a real moment where you weren't sure where your club was going to go, where you're going to survive, even as a football club. But it wasn't just the club that suffered, it was the fans as well, because the fans had their club in effect almost taken away from them in many ways. So we had to look at ways immediately to be able to engage with our community, but to engage with our supporters. We did that mainly through digital, through increasing the frequency of doing updates, regular updates on what our thinking was, where we wanted to go, what we were trying to do as a club, really engaging with everybody within the fan base and the community about that. I started writing for one of our main national papers, doing what they kind of dubbed as the Chairman's Diary, which talked about all of Scottish football. That was in one of our main national papers. I was doing that maybe 2 or 3 times a week as well to keep everybody up to date on things. And then on the financial side, we felt we were in for a bit of a long haul. I don't think we predicted how long it was going to go on for, to be honest, but we felt it was going to be a long haul. So we really had to move quickly to try and get something in place that we could, when we got football back and playing, we could get that content back out to our supporters who needed it, because there's a whole mental health issue which has been brewing over this period, where people look forward to a Saturday, they have their routine on a Saturday, they meet their family, their friends, they go to the same place for their lunch or a drink before the game, and they do the same thing after a game, and it all just stopped for them as well. Compound that with the pandemic that was concerning everybody as well, and it's a real mental health issue, and football had to play its part in delivering something to people to be able to get them out of that, to switch off for 90 minutes on a Saturday. And I was delighted that when we could speak to a company like Pixellot, who were able to come in and say, look, we can deliver something for you, and quickly, because the timescales, by the time we got everything in place, the timescales were really short when we knew we were going to be able to get back playing again. We didn't have the expertise in-house. We'd only did match highlights, which were recorded and put out there. We hadn't done any live. So to get a company that could come along and actually do everything from the filming, editing, highlights packages, all the kind of interactivity that was attached to it, but also crucially have the capacity to be able to deliver that live stream element to it that was robust enough that no matter how many subscribers you had, it would work, was a real godsend to us. And to be honest, that the revenue that we have had coming in as over the last number of months has all come through the revenue from our gate receipts by working with the live stream. So no doubt about it, the live stream element was an absolute lifesaver for the football club.
Good to hear. Interesting that that content became the key, right? To get that content out to your audiences and get those fans engaged. Doug, coming to you, staying on the fans theme. I mean, obviously there are a lot of restrictions now, and also how fans come back into stadiums. A lot of investment is required by organizations. I mean, how do associations handle this demand for fans and for this content? What else can they do? I mean, is automated content, automated video production the only way, or is there anything else that they can do?
Well, I mean, the real issue is national associations have a unique place in the world and have a very different situation than say Iain was talking about, right? First, they don't. They're not as focused on profit and loss, because their main mission is to protect, promote, and develop football in their country. And they're in a unique place where if you sat back and said, what media rights do I have to sell? How much money comes in for everything I have? the vast majority of the commercial value has been covered off in a deal to centralize the rights to the men's national team with UEFA. So they're in a very different position, and each one has different issues. If you look at national team rights, a lot of them basically go, look, this is something we need to invest in. It's about the relationship with fans. It's up to us to evangelize and spread the gospel of football in the country. If we're going to do that, we need to give more people more content to interact with our youth national teams, our women's national teams, and even lower leagues. In some cases, national associations have control of or work very closely with the leagues. And if you're talking about a league, then it's more profit oriented, but maybe it's not. And people would approach it in different ways. If it's a league and the system has to pay for itself, the easy way to fund things generally is to go is to take it, create content, and then sell your international streaming rights to somebody like Stats Performer Genius or IMG Arena or Sport Radar, and that's a revenue stream, and it needs to pay for itself. Others have said, okay, let's create a revenue stream. Maybe we provide a subscription service. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. It kind of depends on each individual market. And then there's the issue of what's the quality. But there are also plenty out there who have said, look, we need to do this, or we need to keep our fans engaged with football during the pandemic. We need to get it out there to build the audience, because again, our mission is protect, promote, develop, and we need to spread the gospel of football. So people have come at it different ways. The thing that before kind of Pixellot kind of stepped into this space, everybody had the option of either I can pay a certain amount to bring a camera crew on site and do a 4-camera production, or I've got to go something very simple, very cheap and cheerful, a free service where like a MyCuju, where maybe I've got a camera, I've got video, I can spread it out there, but I'm giving away my content rights, and that's maybe not appropriate for National Association in terms of brand environment and giving away. So the real thing has been, okay, if I go from either a mobile phone to I have to pay for a 4-camera production, I have no choice in between. And if you've got an option in between, there's a whole lot more you can do, and there's a whole lot more matches you can do in a cost-effective way, and you can provide content to fans.
Makes sense, Doug. Basically, there's no one size fits all. Each type of organization has to find the relevant solution for them. Shout out to Ben, Niharika, and Lizzie for joining the Camera On party. We encourage everybody else to do so as well. As always, please drop your questions in the chat. Albert, I'll come to you. Switching from fans to technology, which is an important thing for us to discuss today. How did the pandemic change the way y'all examine technology at Barca Innovation Hub?
Well, to be honest, the processes that we have internally on the scouting for technology didn't change it that much. What it changed is basically was how the different units of the club needed to adapt themselves to the new situation, right? So it was more of a, okay, the acceleration is here. The internal digital transformation was really fast, and we kind of acted applying the same several processes that we had in order to serve the needs that these business units had, and that right now they were in a rush, right? And here, everything has to do with automated, with every single process of the club that needed interaction between employees. We try to find a place where digital solutions could help us avoid this interaction, right? And that comes to the sports part, with the Pixellot, but also everything that we have to do with the scouting solutions, for data analysis as well. And also on the business side, we launched, the digital department launched the OTT, the e-commerce platform for our merchandising. So kind of projects that were already there that accelerated for the fact that the pandemic kind of put it us in a pressure to do so.
Right, I guess maybe the pandemic just created different types of urgency. You had to get stuff moving in different ways than you were used to. All right, I think Absolutely. What I wanted to do was basically just divide the session in 2 parts. We've talked a lot about what happened with the pandemic and how each of these organizations dealt with them. What I'd like to do now for the next maybe 7-8 minutes that we have is to talk about the way forward. Like, what can we do? And Mylan, I'll start with you. How can all of these sports organizations that we're talking to future-proof themselves in terms of their own assets, their own media? How do they get that fan engagement to ride another, I don't know, unforeseen event that might come up?
Well, there's no one answer, because we're talking about huge diversity, from teams like that Albert represents, to the teams that Iain represents, and each one has their own needs and strengths and weaknesses and so on. First of all, I mean, I think the bottom line, and I'm not revealing anything new to anybody, is sports brands are the most disrupted genre on earth. I mean, people love their sports teams. The brands are really, really important, and they're iconic. And clubs generally generate very little revenue from their brand value. And who's generating that? The big social media platforms and so on and so forth. So if we're talking about the big elite clubs and everything like that, I mean, again, I don't need to tell Albert what to do or anything like that, but obviously to be able to capture your data, to collect it, to understand it, to be able to act on the data is extraordinarily important in order to understand who your fan is and to be able to generate revenue from that fan, and also on the one hand, and keeping him more engaged and interested on the other hand, and kind of to take back that the narrative, so to speak. And of course, those big elite clubs don't have any necessarily problem of media coverage, so maybe a Pixellot solution isn't necessarily relevant for them in terms of media coverage and engagement. But if you go down the food chain, so to speak, to the mid and lower level clubs, then I think that obviously being able to capture your own content, even if your matches are being produced locally, still to have the ability to capture your own content, to do what you want with it in order to engage your audience, in order to generate additional revenue, is extraordinarily important, against the fact that I would believe that media partners who generally buy the rights are fickle in the best of times and are very pressured in these times because of Corona. So that's probably the best way to future-proof. And I would say, I'll give you an example of a deal that we'll be announcing very shortly with the European Football Association, who organizes their domestic leagues. They have 3 leagues that are under their umbrella: the Premier League in that country, the Women's National League in that country, and the Championship. And we are installing systems in all of the venues of those 3 leagues, even though the Premier League has coverage with domestic broadcasters. But that is exactly what they're doing in terms of future-proofing themselves. First of all, they want to have a baseline with all the clubs in order to enjoy all of the additional benefits that Pixellot system can bring, like cutting highlights for the social media, the coaching and analytical elements, so that all clubs have that as a baseline to begin with. But also they understand that while the Pixellot streaming will be actually the default media solution for the Women's National League and the Men's Championship, for the Men's Premier League, they want to have that because, who knows what's going to happen after the next right cycle, what's going to happen next year. As long as they have the option to be able to stream their matches live with full graphics, with commentary, with sponsorship, with advertising, everything that is necessary, then they know they have leverage in their next negotiation.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, you have to find different ways to get that content out there. Guys, we have only a couple of minutes left, so I'll try to keep this brief. Go back to you, Iain. We spoke about briefly the community angle, and we've already talked about getting content out to the community. What measures are you taking now that's different to maximize that content and that connection with the community, and how is technology involved? Sure.
I think in this sense, I mean, technology has this wonderful ability to be able to connect people. And that's really where, if you look at the positive side of social media and the revolution that's happened over the last decade or so, it's been about connecting people. People can now connect, and it's a bit of a level playing field as well in some senses, because if a club is as big as Barcelona, if they tweet and mention a supporter or a fan for something, the fan loves that because they've had their club connect to them, and that's the same and a club's further down as well as smaller size. And in the community side, it's exactly the same as well. So what we've been doing is just as we've managed to get the community teams back playing again, it's meant that that's had to happen behind closed doors as well. So mums, dads can't come in and watch their kids play football anymore. And I did that as a dad. Used to go and watch my son play, you know, from a really small age in the driving snow and rain, but you stood there and you loved it, watched your kid play. You can't do that at the moment. But using the technology, we're able to live stream the games, live stream training sessions as well. And what our coaches have been doing is, as something happens during a community game, for example, a goal is scored, even though it's live, they will still use the Pixellot features to do a very quick clip of that, upload it to the Twitter feed or the Facebook page, mention the kid by name, and say what a great goal it was, what a great setup, what a great play it was, and that's going out through the club's feed as well. And that just really empowers the not just the person playing, but the family as well. It gets shared amongst relatives, and the grandparents and the uncles and aunts all get to see this as well on there, and it just builds a feeling around the club, gives them something to actually still have during the pandemic. So I think being able to do these things is the key things, linking people up together. And back to that word content that you mentioned, Ron, it's giving people content, using the content that systems like this can deliver to keep people engaged with the club and keep them a part of the club for the future, hopefully.
That's important. And Yossi has put up the board that we have 5 extra minutes. As always in football, we always get a bit of extra time. Thanks, Yossi, for that. Albert, I'll come to you. What kind of technology are you guys seeing at the Barca Innovation Hub that you're connecting with, which helps you service your fans? Is that an important thing that you guys are looking at as you evaluate the way forward? Albert, you're mute again.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, we're seeing the clubs like us, big clubs are transitioning from purely sports clubs to media companies, right? And that brings a lot of restructuring in terms of processes and also hiring new talent, bringing the expertise of this talent to former purely sports talent, and that puts us into that process in the last years. I feel like the pandemic has been also one of the key problems that we face as corporation is the switching cost that we have to pay when we change from one technology to another, just because the internal processes are slow and all that. So you have to be really convinced that from a business unit perspective that's something that makes sense, right? But the pandemic changed that, right? So the pandemic put us into, as Ron was saying just before, into a pressure to deliver, to keep having those activities, right? So in terms of the solutions to do that transition, I feel like we advanced a lot. We advanced a lot, and right now we are, I mean, at least we have a purely value proposition for fans that will never come to our stadium. That was, that by the way, is the majority of them, right? So right now, the fact that no one can come accelerated that process to build those value propositions, and technology that help us to build those propositions on a digital world. That's something that we've been focusing a lot in the last, and we want to be focusing in the next years for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, technology is going to light the way for this way forward, for this road forward. Doug, maybe last word to you. What do you think is going to be that key game-changing element that all sports teams, all football teams are going to have to be cognizant of? Doug, you're on mute. Yeah, there you go.
I mean, what does everybody need to be cognizant of? I mean, really, everybody faces the same set of problems. It's really just about what's urgent and important now based on the situation. The pandemic, I mean, the needs for content, the needs to engage with fans, the needs that Finn has asked about stadium experience, they're all needs that everybody's had. And then, but the pandemic has just kind of has put certain things to the forefront and made people focus on certain things. But in terms of long term, what people need to be cognizant of is how do we everybody needs to attract their audience. They need to build a relationship with the audience. They need to gauge the audience. Content is the most compelling thing to do. most compelling vehicle to do that. So continuing to find ways to do that is obviously quite important.
Yeah, getting that content out to your communities, out to your fans in different ways, and not just, I think we've addressed a lot of topics, how it works for the elite and what they can do, and how it works at different levels of football, professional, semi-professional, how the rights holders, whether they are leagues, associations, some of the things that they have to do. I think we've covered a broad range of topics. Unfortunately, I know we promised a little bit of time for audience questions, but we have run clean out. I have already heard the final whistle, even if you haven't already. I have to say thanks so much to my panel. What I would advise is that anybody who's here and who has a question, please jump across to the Pixellot virtual booth. You'll get a bunch of information there. You can get some FaceTime with anybody that you want to from that company and understand how they do, how they democratize this content and make it available to large audiences.